Hi, I'm Autumn,
And I'm Laura,
and together we're
the
the Boo
Boo
Sisters.
Sisters.
Merry Christmas, everybody, or
Merry Christmas.
or Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah, whatever it is you celebrate. We're here to celebrate with you in our surprise special pop-up episode for the holidays.
Because nothing says Holly Jolly Merry Christmas like ghost stories.
But that's actually very true, Laura, because in the United Kingdom, during Yule, the darkest day of winter and the darkest season, people would gather around the Yule log and the burning candlelight flame. And it was traditional to actually tell haunted, scary ghost stories during the winter months.
Yep. I did a little bit more research about that if you want to know. There's a little bit of specifics.
Yeah, I do want to know.
I think this episode is for anybody who's ever wondered why the Christmas song, It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year, has the lyrics with scary ghost stories and tales of the glories. And you're like, why are there scary ghost stories at Christmas?
I didn't, I never even caught that line. Maybe I love ghost stories so much. I was like, of course, why wouldn't you gift a ghost story to somebody?
Uh-huh, exactly.
Yeah.
So, as you were saying, it comes from a European tradition passed down from ancient Norse culture during the holiday of Yule, which was a precursor to Christmas. And in that precursor, spirits called dreggers, I'm probably mispronouncing that, but it's Dregrs, would roam the land while the veil between life and death was the thinnest, i.e., the winter equinox.
It's kind of different than Howell's Eve, where don't they believe the veil between the earth and the dead is thinnest on Halloween?
I think multiple cultures share the idea that that is when the veil is thinnest. But
Okay.
um, as I was saying, so these spirits called dreggers would roam the land, and the only way to disperse the spirits, supposedly, when not all of them were kind, was to appease them either with gifts or sometimes with tales of their life and death.
Oh, that's
So, really, what
interesting.
we're doing today, we're just appeasing the spirits of Christmas past.
With tales of their life and death. So you would essentially be telling your ancestors' stories to the people still living, basically, correct?
Yes, I wouldn't say always ancestors, but yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, that's so cool. I love
I
it.
thought it
Yeah.
was cool too. Segue, what are some of your current Christmas traditions?
Oh, Christmas traditions. We'll open one present, let the kids open one present on Christmas Eve, and um, then on Christmas morning, we'll open the rest of the presents, and I will come down before the kids and make sure that Christmas lights are turned on and it looks really pretty and that we have enough coffee brewed. And I'll also make some hot cocoa for the kids and get everything ready and then let them come down. So the rule is that they have to stay upstairs in their beds until the adults are ready, which is a nice little treat for us because we can sleep in a little bit because they know that there's no presents until we allow them out of their rooms on Christmas morning.
The
Because,
parents get a break tradition.
yeah, because sleep is probably my favorite Christmas gift. And we love going to free Christmas concerts at the different churches around the area. We don't have any really unusual Christmas traditions, do you?
As far as Americana culture goes, it's probably not unusual, but the first thing I thought of was that I get Chinese food on Christmas Eve. That's one of my traditions, so that I don't have to cook or do anything on Christmas Eve and I can just enjoy it, like enjoy the merriment of it all.
That seems unusual to me. James and I typically have had a quote date on Christmas night or Christmas Eve, we will have fondue on one of those nights without the kids
Hmm.
really late when they go to bed as like our in-house date. But bringing in Chinese sounds a lot less work.
And probably less messy too. Less cleaning up
Yeah.
afterward. You just throw the stuff away. Aside from that, what else do I do? I make Christmas cookies. That's a tradition we grew up with, and decorating and frosting them, which is always fun. And you know me, historically taking hours and hours while everybody else is done with theirs.
Right, because you want to get them perfectly painted to look
Hmm.
like the
I'm
real life
just
thing you're painting.
I'm just a creative soul. I just have good ideas and it takes a while to bring them out. And as I recall growing up, you get to a point where you just like slap some frosting on them and you start like eating them.
Yeah, I'm like, this is over. This is over. I'm just eating. But now it's even worse because I don't even slap the frosting on the cookies. I literally just dip the cookies in the frosting bowl and start
Oh my
eating it.
gosh.
Okay, so we know this little old lady, and she's so cute. The other day, she comes up to me. Ainsley and I are walking, and she comes up to me and she says, "Does your little girl like dolls?" And I
Oh my
say,
gosh. Run the other direction.
yes, of course. She loves dolls. She loves dolls. And the lady says, "Well, I have a doll collection and I've been thinking about giving them a new home. It's time for me to give them a new home since I'm 90." And she's so cute, Laura. Like, she's so cute. And
Okay, but listen, hear me out. This is the start of a horror movie, what you just described. Now, I'm not
no,
saying this old lady is not cute. I'm sure that she's 100% cute and has the best good spirited intentions. But if you just listen to the words you just said and the way that you put that story out there, it sounds like the perfect beginning to a really scary horror movie about doll or
oh my
dolls.
gosh. Well, of course, Ainsley is standing right there next to me, and she is 4.5, so she's knows what we're talking about. The lady says, "Oh, here's a picture of the dolls I have that I'd like to give a new home." She shows Ainsley the picture, and she says, "What doll would you like, sweetie?" And Ainsley points to one. She goes in her house and comes back out with this doll, Laura. This doll is like a life size 9-month old that's just as heavy as a 9-month old and looks so realistic and is in this white lacy doll gown, and the the eyelashes are real on the doll, and it like
Wait, what do you
pierces
mean
in.
real? Like somebody's real eyelashes were
No,
added
I
to the
just mean
doll?
they're like not painted on the doll, but the eyes are made, they're the old like glass eyes that are like embedded in the doll head. And Ainsley hugs this doll and immediately falls in love with it. And the lady is so happy that she's given this doll her new home. We take the doll home, and on the doll's wrist is a little tag that we find. And the tag says that the doll was gifted to the lady in 1980,
That's a
44
while ago.
years ago, and could be older than that because who knows where it came from there. But this doll is so spooky to me, and she's had it for so long. I'd like to know what our listeners think because I don't want to keep this doll, but I feel like a moral commitment now to give this doll a new home.
My first instinct is burn it with fire. And my second instinct is I understand the moral commitment you feel, but I feel like there's a lot of children out there that would appreciate a doll that isn't necessarily in your household.
Yeah, but then I
And if it
also
were
feel bad
me,
because Ainsley now loves it. She's named her Flower Girl.
oh, that doesn't sound creepy at all.
However, I feel like Ainsley is kind of like, oh, this doll might be a little creepy because the doll's home is now tucked away in a back corner of her room where you can't really see it.
So I feel like this horror movie is progressing rather quickly.
But so to wrap up, I think that I'm just going to keep it until your next visit, in which case, then I will put it down in the guest room.
Oh, please. Please do that.
That's the first Christmas gift of the season. So it's going to be a great Christmas.
But if it had
Yeah,
been anything else, like an old purse or like a stuffed animal or,
a
some
hundred
other kind of
dollars.
toy, it wouldn't be as creepy. $100. This $100 was passed down to me through generations. Would you like it?
Please give it a safe home. Oh, okay. Yeah, we can do that. That's
Well, that's a
that's my
good
season
creepy
so far.
story to start with.
Yeah, that's the first potential haunting story.
In the spirit of Christmas, we're doing stories that have something to do with Christmas in
Yes.
some fashion. Either something's taken place on Christmas or it has a Christmas connection, something. I am really excited about my story. And that is because it has to do with a knight, like an actual knight in
Oh,
Shining Armor Knight. But he may or may not have scruples. So let's get into that.
okay.
My story is about the ghost of Sir Geoffrey de Mandeville.
Wow. Did you look up how to say that before this episode?
I did
It
not.
seems it seems complicated. Okay.
I'm just going with first instinct here. If somebody thinks that I'm saying this wrong, that's fine. Sir Geoffrey de Mandeville was the very first Earl of Essex and Sheriff of London, Essex, and Middlesex, and was a prestigious European landowner in the 1100s, which feels weird to say, the 1100s. That's so long
Right.
ago.
We're so used to also, I think, doing United States stories, and our country started in the 1700s.
Right. So it's like 1100s. That's not a real time.
Yeah.
Because of his title and position, he had influence in royal politics of the time. He also was the first constable of the Tower of London, which held political prisoners. Unfortunately, during his office, there was a political prisoner, and get this name you'll like even more, Ranulph Flambard. I love
Lambard.
names.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so the political prisoner Ranulph Flambard escaped the tower, and he was the first to do so in the tower's entire history. So you have to imagine Sir Mandeville, he was in a little bit of trouble for
Hmm.
letting this prisoner escape. It led King Henry the First to strip Mandeville of his title and a third of his estate. However, a new king, King Stephen, when he came into power, he forgave Mandeville and his estate was returned along with his title and position. But this was a period of anarchy, and as is the case of much of European history, there was a dispute for the throne. The fight over the throne was happening between King Stephen and King Henry's daughter, Matilda. And if you recall, King Henry is the one who put him away, and King Stephen's the one that forgave him. Okay.
Okay.
And this conflict over the throne turned into a civil war in 1135. Mandeville attempted to use his intellect and cunning to benefit from both sides during this war. And caught between two power hungry leaders, he found himself making some errors in judgment, you would say. When King Stephen's hold was weakening, and that's the guy who forgave him, he switched to the royal daughter's side. But unfortunately, King Stephen regained power in 1143 and promptly attempted to arrest Mandeville for treason, stripping him once again of his estate and titles.
What?
So Mandeville then breaks free and does not get officially arrested for treason. And enraged by having lost everything yet again, he was forced to leave aristocracy behind for the life of a bandit. And in his armor, like you imagine this knightly guy in his armor
Hmm.
being a bandit, he terrorized the Fenland on the Isle of Ely
Okay.
as he tried to wreak havoc upon his former ally, King Stephen.
You have this knight turned rogue,
Yeah,
basically.
basically. So it's
Okay.
a knight who maybe did some like unscrupulous things and switched sides a couple times back and forth between who was in power and tried to get money out of it and get better titles out of it, and now is in trouble and has to turn rogue and has to become a bandit and live that lifestyle. And
Okay.
as he is being a bandit and living that lifestyle, he tries to, in a sense, get revenge or rise up against the person who just took his title away so that he could get it back once again. So then, in a skirmish in the fall of 1144, an arrow struck his head, and the wound he sustained killed him. But it took several weeks of anguish and pain for him to actually die.
Oh my, a head wound?
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, due to his exile, he was not allowed a Christian burial, but rather his body was taken to the Knight Templars Temple in London and hung from a tree in a lead casket.
Wow.
So, ever since his grisly demise, those who visit his lands, the lands that he owned, particularly a place called Pimsbrook Bridge in East Barnet or Barnet, which is a place that's between Hertfordshire and Middlesex, have reported strange sounds such as marching footsteps, galloping hooves, and ghostly howling. Not only
Oh,
that, but over
it
the
it
yeah,
reminds me of Sleepy Hollow.
a little bit, right?
Right, like if the ghost of Sleepy Hollow came galloping back and was a haunting. Yeah. Maybe
It
they got it from that.
also it also reminds me a little bit of like Sherlock Holmes and the Hound of the Baskervilles. I'll get to that in just a second. So, not only have people witnessed those things, but over the 900 plus years since his death, there have also been direct sightings of a broad and often heavily armored figure cloaked in deep red. His hazy image manifests from the fog, traversing the lands with a headless dog at his side. Isn't that
Mm,
weird?
yes, that's a weird. That's like that's a ghost. You always have like, oh, the blue lady or oh, this child ghost, but you don't have
A night with
the
a headless dog?
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one I haven't heard before.
So sometimes his figure is seen as skeletal. Other times, witnesses see him completely clad in a suit of armor. And still other times, only the headless hound is seen running and hunting through the night. But the one thing these haunted sightings have in common is that they consistently happen on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Nobody knows
Oh,
exactly why. And get this too,
maybe he really loved Christmas.
maybe
Where is this exactly?
it's in East Barnet or Barnet, which is between
Okay.
Hertfordshire and Middlesex.
Okay.
And there's parks there now. But yeah, so it's supposed to happen on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, but not every Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, only every 6 years.
Okay. Is this year one
So
of the
that's a
six?
little strange.
What's the next time?
The next time is in 2028.
2028. Maybe we should do an international trip in
Maybe,
2028.
maybe.
Oh gosh. Okay.
So many believe that what happened to his body after he died, like not being able to have the proper burial for so long, trapped his spirit on earth. Others say it was just the fact that his land was taken from him. And there's a story, a legend that goes along with it to say that he left a curse on the land. And he said something to the effect of, should my lands ever be taken from me again, ruin will befall all who dwell within. And
Oh.
within that legend, some even claim he specifically mentioned that he would return to check on the land and punish his betrayers, accompanied by a headless hound. That's a little far fetched,
What?
like very specific.
That matches a little too deeply.
I think that that's exaggerated from the legend because of what people have seen.
Right.
So, should you like to visit and try to catch a glimpse of a nightly figure emerging from the fog on a cold Christmas night, you can do that in 2028.
What if
Go
you're not
right
at the right
there.
the right part of the park or something and you miss
Right?
it? That'd be so
Exactly.
sad.
So, a couple weird things about this that in researching some questions, like what you just asked, right? Like, what if you're not in the right place? Because his lands were kind of far and wide.
So maybe it's not every 6 years. Maybe it's every year and people are just missing it a little bit.
There's still a lot of questions around why Christmas, why six, why the headless hound, why any of those things. So
Hmm.
some say that it could be a hellhound or some kind of demon that's tethered to him that he's made a bond or a demonic pact with in order to return and haunt his homelands. And that maybe that's why it only happens every 6 years, because six is considered by many to be the devil's number. And I
Oh,
don't know
yeah.
that I
I think
100%
it's
agree
that.
with that.
No, it's that.
What? You just like jumped right on that. Like, yep, for sure.
I'd go with that.
So good theory. Autumn approved. Another thing was that I was researching like what else maybe has happened in the area that could be contributing. That's 900 years ago. And you're telling me no one else died or nothing else happened in that area? As I did look into it, there are a number of other kinds of sightings that happen in the area. In the 1950s and 1980s, there are reports of a tall figure in a long dark cloak, but the difference was that this figure wore a large hat. So that doesn't seem necessarily to be the same kind of spirit. And then another ghost who supposedly haunts the same grounds is that of a monk that's seen with a cowl and a hood and no face,
Oh my gosh, monk ghosts are the worst.
which we do know that there were a lot of abbeys in the area, and he even used one for his base. So
Yeah.
that's not far afield.
Maybe something on the land is giving it more energy, like limestone or something.
Probably a lot of water flowing through the area too. I did read that this is more swamp marsh type lands, which is why there's so much mist and fog on a nightly basis there.
Oh, I
And
would
that
love
in and
that.
of itself can just give people like a creepy feel, right? Like right off the bat, they can be looking for something more paranormal or creepy just because the atmosphere is weird.
Right. It might even disorient you a little bit.
For
Yeah.
sure. So, one other note about the history of the area that I thought you would really like is that it was also historically significant and saw death during the Battle of Barnet in April of 1471. So, a good 200 and something, 300 years later from Sir
Yeah.
Geoffrey. During the battle, many of the losing side fled into the woods and villages in the area and kind of dispersed until they were killed. They were actually in a desperate, panic filled hunt to the death by the winning side. So imagine you see your general fall and everybody starts running in just a chaos mess
Yeah, that's
everywhere and
horrible.
tries to hide, and the other side hunts you down to kill you.
Yeah, that would be the most terrifying way to die, knowing that you're being hunted.
Mm-hmm. I think that that would leave a pretty strong psychic imprint on the area and probably cause some paranormal activity. Even the howling that was heard, or the horse hooves.
Right. But yeah, like you said, you have all that energy that's this built up anger, fear, all of this negative energy that's imprinted now on that land and the trees and ugh.
Another note I made was about the lead casket. I don't know if that piqued your interest, but I was like, hung a lead casket from a tree. What's happening there? Is that a good thing or a bad thing or what? In the research I was doing, they made it sound like, oh, his body was disgraced. He was taken to this temple and hung from this tree in this lead casket. But everything that I could find reading wise was that it's actually a sign of respect and honor, because lead
Oh.
caskets are typically used for royalty. They slow down the process of decomposition and prevent smells and gases from being released, and they're more secure in general because of how heavy they are.
So
When he was
they were like
excommunicated,
I honoring him.
yeah, I kind of think so, because when he was excommunicated from his lands, and I'm thinking because his body couldn't return there immediately to be buried, they maybe just used this higher end casket and things as a holding place for him temporarily so he would decompose less until he could be buried in his lands again and be back home. And the reason that a casket or a coffin is hung in different cultures is usually because they're trying to keep it away from all of the elements on the ground, which are not just the weathering elements, but also animals getting into it and grave robbers.
Oh.
So that's kind of the reasoning that I found that could be for that. His body was eventually moved and laid beneath Walden Abbey on one of his lands.
It's
So, for
true.
those of you who are critics out there, here's a little piece of information for you to think about. Most of the recorded sightings originate from the articles and letters published in the Barnett Press in the 1920s and 1930s. The first article appeared in 1924. It was about two women who were walking in the park, and another was from a night watchman. And both of those
Mm.
groups of people, when they were contacted, denied having seen anything. But
What?
then, yeah, exactly. The weirdness. So the article was written, it was published. And then when they were contacted by other sources, they denied it. They denied the story.
What? It's like some kind of government conspiracy. That's
So I'm
happened in
not gonna,
so many of our stories where they're like, oh, don't say anything about the ghost problem.
right. That's a common theme.
Right.
6 years after that, which would have been in 1930, the East Barnett Psychical Research Society announced in their press that some of its members had seen the ghost on December 17th, which wasn't Christmas, but that they would look for him again on Christmas Day and expect his coming. That article prompted almost 700 locals and tourists to descend upon the park that Christmas in
Oh my
1930.
gosh. Wow. And so did
And
they see something?
the only ones that saw anything that day happened to be more society members and a reporter who was with them. And some believe it's the same reporter who wrote all of the original articles.
Oh my goodness, it is a conspiracy by one guy.
So there you go, fellow, critics and skeptics out there.
That's really interesting, Laura, because my story also has legend to it. And I put here in the margin of my notes that there is some truth in every story and some story embedded in every truth. It goes with yours and mine. That's the theme of the day of this
But is
Christmas
yours a
episode.
Christmas conspiracy? Because I feel like mine
Maybe.
is.
I didn't think of it that way, but who knows? Maybe it is a
Okay,
Christmas
well,
conspiracy.
I'm
But then
excited
you
to
have to
listen
think,
to yours.
like, why did that reporter want everyone coming on Christmas to the
To
park?
that park. Yeah,
Right. Like,
exactly.
what was happening? Like, was he trying to pull them away from something else? He's really like a huge bank robber and was trying to get people out of the city or something.
Maybe. Or maybe he was just a writer who was trying to write stories and get people, I don't know, interested in what he had to say. Because
Yeah. I mean,
then you go
that
and you
seems
write
more
about
likely.
the legend or something and it's more famous.
Right.
So, yeah,
Right.
I'm excited though. Let's hear about yours.
I have to give you my boo rating.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Boo rating. What would you
Oh,
say?
yeah. Okay. So my boo rating for your story is a two. And I say two because of the hellhound dog would, I think, be super scary for me, but that's really the only part. I would go. I would stake out the park just to see what happened. So
Just to see if a knight appears with a red cloak.
yeah, yeah, I would have to go. So, but I love the story. I love the theory. I actually, so in researching stories, I did not come across that one.
Woo! Job done.
Yeah. So you like dug deep.
I actually read a lot, what I thought was a lot more scary stories than this one, but I was like, heck, it's a Christmas episode, and
We'll
I
keep
love
it
the
light.
idea of knights and dogs, so whatever.
We'll keep it light.
But also, oh, I forgot one other note to the story was that Sir Mandeville did actually have hunting hounds when he was alive, and he supposedly, when he was on the run as a bandit, that he hid out with one of his dogs near the place where he's seen now. So another theory is that it's one of his dogs.
Oh, okay. Maybe that makes more sense. Maybe it is real now. Okay. So my story also takes place in the United Kingdom, where the telling of ghost tales during Yule dates back centuries, like we talked about. It was easy to find Christmas stories from that part of the world.
Yeah,
And
I didn't really
so,
see very many from America or
right,
anywhere else for that
right.
matter.
So we're going to travel to the United Kingdom to the Bramshill House. We should just apologize right now to all our England listeners that we're probably like butchering their language.
Names of cities and places.
Yeah. So sorry. Brahms Hill was erected sometime during the 1350s. It was a very stately manor, even for its day. It was solid red brick facade, and the center grand entrance area is white stone with ornate carvings covering it. It stands on its vast property of 2,500 acres and looks like it could have been used in a movie rendition of a Jane Austen novel.
I'm
That's my
there.
yeah,
Sold.
that's my description of looking at it. I was like, "Oh, this is such a classy description that I wrote from looking at this picture."
Nice. Good
Yeah.
job.
Ever since it was constructed, it's been held by various noblemen. Throughout the centuries, it traded hands several times and was used for many purposes and had many different important guests, including King James I and the Archbishop of Canterbury. Historians have identified 11 different build periods within the home itself. The most prominent documented residence of the home was John Cope, who acquired the manor in 1699. In World War II, Brahms Hill was used as a maternity ward, and then after the war, it was used as a shelter for the exiled King of Romania and his wife, who had been against the pro-Nazi government. They're like, hey, King of Romania, you can come live in this house since you got kicked out of your country because you're against Nazis. And he lived there for a while. Most recently in its history, it was used from 1953 to 2015 as a police training academy until it was closed altogether. Most of the hauntings I'm about to report to you were actually documented by officers and students of the police academy during their stay at the Bramshill House.
I
The
love
col
the stories that we have when police officers are the witnesses.
I know, right?
Those
The
are the best.
college the college secretariat kept, quote, a ghost file, which meticulously recorded all the encounters that were officially reported by the officers and students at the academy. They're like, oh, let's get out the file again.
Also, it would be a really good name for a show, Ghost File, almost like X Files.
I'm sure that has to exist already. It's too good of a name. At first, I thought you were like, what, Brahms Hill House? That sounds like a stupid show.
People would think it's like Bridgerton or something,
Right.
Bromshill,
Brahms
and then
Hill
it would be
House.
all about ghosts, like police officers. Yeah, I don't know.
Bramshill House, but it's really about the drama that goes on in the police academy.
And the hauntings.
What a
Yeah.
strange show.
It seems like that's pretty normal for British comedy, though. I feel would be right
Yeah.
in line.
So the Brahms Hill House is rumored to have 14 ghosts living within its walls. In one room on the first floor, the spirits that have been reported there all hover about 2 feet off the floor. And an interesting fact that was later discovered is that that particular floor was lowered during one of the house build renovations, but the ghosts still seem to wander where they had walked earlier in their lifetime.
Oh, residual haunting.
Right. I just put that little factoid in there because I was like, that's so cool. Okay, so I'm going to tell you about a couple of ghosts. The first one is the Gray Lady, so named because of her gray colored robe that she is said to wear. She's one of the members of the Cope family, that prominent family that is best documented that I mentioned. She has auburn hair and is dressed in a straight, sleeveless robe. One story has it that her husband, a dissenter, was brought to the Bramshill house in the early 17th century, where he was interrogated, tried, and immediately thereafter beheaded on the property. It is said she now wanders through the mansion in search of him. Then you
Hmm.
have your classic phantom kid. The ghost of a nameless kid has been gallivanting about the library. He said they say that he moves books around. The books are not often in their proper place. People have often heard a boy cry out, and it is heard by visitors who have no knowledge of the story of a phantom child. And then the scream is followed by the visitors feeling a small caress in the palm of their hand, as if he's trying to hold their hand for comfort. Sweet boy.
Oh.
I know. And then the Green Man. So reportedly, the Green Man wears green pantaloons and a green waistcoat. They think the Green Man is referring to Henry Cope, who is to who is reputed to have been a descendant of Sir John Cope, and he may have had some kind of mental illnesses. There are some actual newspaper articles that ran humiliating articles about a quote green man at his expense. I read these articles and they make fun. They just call him the green man. Like, oh, the green man came into the drugstore again and he did this hilarious, quote, stupid thing. It's like he was known around the community as this guy to tease and make fun of. And the story,
Mm,
like the articles were so sad. So,
that is really
but then
sad.
there was one last article written by the Staffordshire Advertiser in 1806, and it reads, "Last Saturday morning, a little after 6 o'clock, the gentleman and other eccentricities had obtained the appellation of the Green Man, leaped from the window of his lodgings on the South Parade into the street, ran from thence to the verge of the cliff nearly opposite, and threw himself over the precipice to the beach below. Several persons immediately ran to his assistance and carried him, bleeding at the mouth and ears, back to his lodging. The height of the cliff from whence he precipitated himself is about 20 feet perpendicular, but whether his fall has proved dangerous we have not yet heard. From the general demeanor of the above gentleman, it is supposed he is deranged. His name, we understand, is Henry Cope, and that he is related to some highly distinguished family in our community." So it's rumored that the Green Man who reportedly drowned in the lake may have not actually drowned, but it was this Henry Cope who jumped into the
Mm.
lake and then died later. So there's one portrait that was painted of Henry, and the portrait, he's actually dressed all in green, and he's holding a ring, like a wedding ring in the portrait. I'll post it on our episode page so everyone can see it. The notes on the painting suggest that the portrait was commissioned to mark the sitter's marriage, so the sitter being Henry Cope,
Mm-hmm.
his marriage, but there's no record of the marriage existing anywhere else. In this
What?
article I read, there was this whole like, well, was he so deranged he thought he was getting married and like hired this painter? Or was it that he was going to get married and something horrible happened to his bride? And that's what actually sent him to his watery grave? Like there was all this drama around it. So it's just a really interesting little side note story to the Bramshill House that is unanswered to me anyway.
I like the mystery. I mean, it's a sad mystery. I don't know. It
Right.
just makes you want to go back and investigate somehow and find the
Like,
answers.
right. Like what was going on there? Like this, there, we have this painting, this actual painting that exists of Henry Cope. That's all true. It says he was going to get married, but there's no record of a marriage. And yet, like, we also have all these articles where obviously he had some kind of mental illness for how long we don't really know. It's just so interesting. Anyway, for the sake of our Christmas episode, I'm going to focus on one of the 14 ghosts the most. It's the most interesting entity in the home to me. Some say that this story is about Anne Cope, who would be John Cope's daughter. who was betrothed to Lord Whoville. Others say that it's actually who I'm going to talk about is actually the spirit of Genevieve Orsini, whose wedding in 1727 was prearranged by her well-to-do Italian family. However, for the sake of telling this story, I'm going to call this spirit Anne and tell it from the story as if it is Anne Cope, because that is what is generally believed. It was a frosty Christmas day in the early 17th century. Bramshill is completely decorated in greenery. Candles are everywhere to light the halls with holiday cheer. Cranberries and lavish feasts adorn the dining tables. Kissing boughs and evergreen tips hang down from the doorways and walls. A caravan of carriages lines the long drive leading up to the grand entrance. There was an extra layer of merriment to the Yuletide festivities because a young bride, Anne Cope, is due to be married at the mansion. The couple was married in the afternoon in what I can only imagine was a storybook wedding at this beautiful, huge estate with these gorgeous decorations and the soft snow falling and all of this family around. I have some pictures of the inside of the house when it was used as the police academy. And even then, in our recent history, it's just this elaborate, gorgeous building. So after her and her new husband take their vows, a game of hide and seek is suggested. Here, the
That's
details
like
get.
the best wedding thing ever.
Yeah,
Guys, let's play hide and seek.
yeah. The details get a little fuzzy here, but inevitably the game was suggested in some way, I'm sure, to keep the festivities going, right? No one ever wants to see a party come to an end. So they've had the wedding, they've ate the roast beast, they have
This
all of
isn't the
these.
Whovilles.
Oh, right. They've done all the merriment and they're like, oh no, it's almost time to go. What can we do? Oh, I know, hide and seek. So some stories suggest that Anne, being so young and her childlike sensibility, suggested that they play the game as a way to celebrate. Other tales, which are my personal favorite, suggest that the groomsmen suggested the game and a groomsman pulls mistletoe from the doorway and hands it to Anne, this young, beautiful bride, and he suggests that she hide, and all the groomsmen will attempt to find her, and whoever does find her gets to kiss her. So the couple's like, cool. That sounds like a fun game.
Well,
So,
that sounds a little awkward today in today's standard of life, but
right, in today's standard, but after reading that I was like, "Oh, her suggesting it maybe makes more sense." But then I went back and read pamphlets from the like 1805, and there's actually these pamphlets that were given to women about the etiquette of mistletoe and that how you should not be prudish and allow any gentleman to kiss you when they find you under the mistletoe, even
I'm
if he's
sorry,
like
what?
your uncle. Yeah, I can show you. I can send you a link of these pamphlets, but it's written in Old English, so I'm not going to say it right, but it's like, oh, don't be a prude. If you're under the mistletoe, it's your responsibility to be kissed, so just do it.
Wow. Okay.
So I actually feel like it wasn't a promiscuous suggestion, and it was probably more like this is just the sign of the times kind of thing. Like this is.
Probably.
So she was given a head start, and all the groomsmen spread out to find her. They search the entire mansion from top to bottom, and no one can find her. So at first, the guests are laughing and they're assuming that the young bride is playing some childlike trick on them. And, 30 minutes goes by, a few hours pass by, and people start to get concerned. They search all through the night. They're searching, searching, searching. No one's sleeping. Rumors start circulating that she actually didn't want to be found and then took the opportunity to flee from a marriage that she was deeply against, as some suspected that she did not want to spend her life with you, or perhaps they thought she had been in love with someone else altogether. Others thought maybe something more nefarious had happened and she, in fact, was disposed of by a family member or perhaps a bitter lover or maybe even Hugh himself. More days tick by, more weeks tick by. They're not finding her. Her new husband is visibly distraught. He deeply loves Anne and knew their love to be true. He grieves her disappearance and never remarries for 50 years.
Wow.
50 years. Yeah. And so you probably know where this is heading.
Well, she holed herself up somewhere and died. You always say to kids, don't, go into a freezer or something. So that's where I feel like she's going to be. My instinct says something like that. Like
Yeah.
she got into a chimney chute and got stuck or something.
So one day, the now old man is puttering around in the attic of their home and he is just moving stuff around and he moves something and it hits a panel on the wall and the panel of the oak wall pops open. Inside the panel of the wall is this elaborate carved wooden chest. He opens the chest, and inside are the skeletal remains of his beloved Anne,
What?
still in her wedding dress, blood-stained from probably her knuckles pounding on the lid, and Anne is still clutching the remains of her bouquet.
Powerful visual, devastating image to that guy. That would just
Yeah,
be the worst thing. Like to know that she was still there somewhere and that time moved on and you lived there while she was dying somewhere,
right. So
like in the home.
inside the lid, there's scratches all over the wood on the inside of the lid, evidence of Anne's futile attempt to escape, the spring hinge that was impossible to open from the inside. And I was just thinking, as Anne, at what point do you decide, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, well, everyone has given up on me, and then try to get out of the chest and you realize you can't get out?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm sure she thought, okay, well, they're still all gonna hunt for me. I'm gonna start yelling so they can find me. And she's yelling and screaming. And at what point then, does
Do
your
you
voice
stop
run
yelling and
out?
screaming? Yeah.
Do you get harsh because you haven't had water? Do you lose your voice first? At what point do you lose hope that anyone is still looking for you? Hope is like the first domino, and everything else just crumbles afterwards, right? Nothing else matters at that point. If you're thirsty, if you're hungry, you just kind of give in. I'm going to die of thirst. I'm going to die of starvation.
Yeah.
Which
Wow. That's just so sad.
yeah. Throughout the 19th century, dozens of poems and songs and paintings are made in reference to this gruesome tale. The first emerges in 1809. One of the most famous songs written about it is called The Mistletoe Bough by Sir Henry Bishop, and you can look it up and listen to it. There was a short poem written by Samuel Rogers that goes, "Oh, sad was her fate in sportive jest. She hid from her lord in an old oak chest. It closed with a spring, and her bridal bloom lay withering there in that living tomb." Ugh, it's such a sad Christmas story. So, since Anne's death, there have been reports of a white lady in the Bramshill House. She roams the halls, but is mainly spotted in one particular room called the Fleur de Lis room. So, Michael the First and Queen Anne of Romania, who I talked about earlier, when they got to the house, they picked that room. It's like the estate room, right, where the bride and groom would have been. It would have been their room. He then moved all of their stuff to a different room, and it is reported that, quote, he says, "I need to avoid the woman in right and her constant disturbances." And the disturbances despite being seen and heard, include an overwhelming scent of lilies. So some report that this story is mostly fiction, but like I said earlier, I believe that there is some truth in every story and some story in every truth. From what I gather from different reports, it seems like there was definitely a woman's skeleton found inside a chest at Bramshill House at some point. However, how it ended up there is part of the story that everyone seems unsure about. There's no document of a wedding happening in which this event occurred. So they're unsure if that's actually how a woman got in a chest.
Another
Um,
undocumented wedding. They really need to document these things.
yeah. So, and then, right. I was like, what's with it with weddings and this Bramshill house? Maybe that's a secret society. So there's a chest on display when visiting the Bramshill house. But Sir William Henry Cope, who I talked about earlier, he wrote a work called Bramshill, Its History and Architecture. So tons of people in 1883 were coming to the estate to see this chest that was on display. And so he wrote in this pamphlet that he distributed throughout the town that the chest on display in the house is now a facsimile of the original. He added that the original had been large enough to fit a woman of comely proportions, and that was true, but it was removed by Sir Denzil Cope's widow in 1812. So basically, he's writing a pamphlet saying, stop coming to my house. I have a chest. It's not the chest that you're wanting to see, basically,
I would
is what he's
imagine it
saying.
would be removed right away. You would not want that there.
Right.
I also
So
wonder certain things like how did they find out that she couldn't escape because it latched or spring hinged or something? Did someone have to be inside to figure that out? Or was it just the way that they were
I,
made back in that
yeah,
day?
yeah, I think you could tell if you were wise or knowledgeable about the type of chest. I think you could have opened it and been like, oh, this is the kind of spring that doesn't open from the inside. I was like, I don't understand why there's a secret panel of wood hiding an elaborate, amazing chest in the wall. And I researched that a little bit. And again, this is legend, but people were theorizing that she was hiding the chest as a wedding present. Maybe she did suggest it. And this was all her rouge to be like, surprise, here's your wedding present, this awesome piece of furniture kind of thing
But then if no
he had
one
made.
knew about the panel even, that's not somewhere you're going to be found. If you want to be found to say,
Right.
surprise,
And
here's your
then
furniture.
you think you have servants or something back then who would have been like, oh, okay, we're all in this together. Here's where we put this gift in the secret panel.
Mm-hmm.
And then you think, okay, well, then those servants would have been like, hey guys, maybe she's in the secret panel.
Right. Even if they didn't know about it, why wouldn't you, as the lady of the house, be seen by those people who are the invisible people kind of in your household at the time period? That nobody saw you go that way, or that you didn't tell somebody, here's where I'm going to hide, just an FYI.
Well, I think if you've all been drinking, it's like this game and they're all in the, I don't know, parlor room. And she's like, okay, no one come out for 5 minutes. And you just run up to the attic real quick. You're not
Right.
really thinking straight. I mean, I feel like it could really happen. The other woman I mentioned before who it could be possibly that Genevieve woman from the Italian family, there was a theory that the chest that John Cope was visiting Italy bought a chest with like a whole bunch of things in it, like, like at a estate sale type
Mm-hmm.
stuff. It was shipped to England. And when they were emptying the chest and getting it ready for its new homes, they found the remains of this woman in it who had fled her prearranged marriage. But anyway, that is the story of the Mistletoe Bride. You're welcome.
And with that, Merry Christmas.
Going back to Yule, that's how
All
we
we're
celebrate
doing
it.
is helping her spirit find rest, whoever she was, by telling her
Right,
story so
right.
she
And
doesn't wander around and haunt us.
it's a good thing I mentioned both women, just in case, because we don't know who it was. What's your boo rating?
I would rate it a 3. It's the pulling at the heartstrings intensity of the story and the imagery and the idea of it that's most
Hmm.
scary, not the haunting itself. A woman wandering around in white, man, that happens every day, everywhere. We hear that all the time.
Right, it's not that scary. And there's nothing mean about the ghost. She's
Hmm.
not a mean spirit either. So it wouldn't be scary, I think, to come in contact with her.
If you had said to me something like, and people still hear her screams and scratching on the wood and knocking from places, okay, that's a little bit more scary for the haunting's sake. As you said, some of these could just be simply legend,
Right.
that it's trying to explain some small factual thing that people don't know all the details of, and they make it into a bigger story and something more grand and intense. And the same could be true of de Mandeville.
Right, exactly. And I think especially when you go overseas and you're going back so many centuries, stories
Mm-hmm.
get churned and developed and exaggerated. And so,
And often mixed together because you could have multiple wars happening in the same area.
right.
And then you get all this mishmash of things, legends that are really, really close to each other and happen really, really close to each other physically. And those could mix. It's
So
hard to know
anyway,
the truth, but the truth is out there.
okay, X-Files.
No, Ghost File. It's called
Oh,
Ghost File.
Ghost Files. If we had a second podcast, we would name it Ghost Files. Maybe we should change it. That's a pretty good
Too
one.
late. Boo Sisters
Okay,
for life.
that's right. On that note, you can go bake your Christmas cookies, go fill your stockings.
Hug your loved ones.
Yes, be with the ones
Instruct
you love.
everybody not to hide in places that they can't get out of.
Go play a game of hide and seek where you find everybody. But most importantly, love yourself and love the people you are with for the holidays. And that's what matters most. Thanks for being weird with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. And as always, happy
Happy
haunting.
haunting.